Welcome into another edition of Mic'd Up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now, and really all throughout the Now family of networks. I'm Mike Asti. Mike Vukovcan is off this week on vacation with his family. We also had a few days off as I entered a new chapter of my life. I do have a ring on my finger now as I got married this past weekend. So a new era for one of these mics and a returning co-host to fill in as the other host of this show will have Mike in his middle name, Alan Michael Saunders, obviously very familiar to all of you throughout our network. So, Alan, I think it's out there on my weekend. So how was your weekend?
My weekend was pretty solid. Did some yard work, low key, nothing major, but congratulations to you and your wife, and excited for you. All of us were here at PSN, and happy that Mike gets a week at the beach. Other Mike,
right.
And then maybe we'll get you there too someday.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's still happening. So this show might be in flux for the next month. We're going to try to get them out to you, of course, as Mic'd Up does this for and is presented by Martin Lawn Services. You can contact Doug Martin for all your lawn care needs. I know Mike Vukovcan did actually. He's working on a patio out there in his backyard. So he might, I was told there potentially might be a Mic'd Up on location, maybe a barbecue we might be doing out there now. So we'll see if that happens here throughout this summer. But, of course, you can hit up Doug Martin at 412-849-5894. And, yes, I might go on a honeymoon here in the next month, hopefully before Steelers training camp at the end of July. So we'll see if we do have – oddly enough, we have another Michael middle name throughout the network there who's also co-hosted one of these. So we can keep it mic'd up no matter what, even if I'm gone.
Keep it in the Mike family. I think it's fine. And maybe if we have to go with a non-Mike, maybe we'll just give him like 30 microphones. So he's just very mic'd up.
Exactly.
He's not a mic.
That can work. Yeah, so it's literal as well.
Literally
as
mic'd up, as opposed to just the name.
Yeah. Well, nonetheless, though, mic'd up here to start off your morning as we're getting mic'd up in our topics here this morning, as this is not exactly the most fire topic time around Pittsburgh sports, but of course we're getting towards Steelers season, so that means Steeler talk, Steeler conversation, Steelers in your mind, and it's Steelers OTAs. So our takeaways from Steelers OTAs. And then, surprisingly enough, for what the season has been, we talked some Pirates earlier in the year that has certainly dipped, but KeBryan Hayes has finally returned, as I feel like I kept asking on the postgame shows, any word, when is it going to happen, etc. We get KeBryan Hayes back. He's played well, this team playing better off of some series against lesser opponents and have some series coming up against good teams, to say the very, very least. So we'll see if that can continue. And if fans can get down there, if you guys are going to get down to the ballpark with KeBryan Hayes there, because so far that hasn't really been something that kind of screams as happening. To start things off, though, Alan, Steelers Now, we're covering the Steelers exclusively, of course, here. We have a lot going on over there at SteelersNow.com in terms of our Steelers coverage during the offseason. We're now there in OTAs. You looking for a Steelers press pass?
I don't see one. I don't think there's one right behind me. No Steelers. I gotta get that fixed.
You definitely got to get that fixed because I can attest. I've been there with you in person. We have both.
Hey, hold on. Hang on. We got.
Okay, he's gonna get. We both have personally covered the Steelers now for several years. We actually both of us.
We can just do that.
There you go.
Knock the whole thing off.
Okay, I think you're going to cover it though for the show, but that's a good.
But it's back there. You know it. The viewers know it's back there now.
The viewers know, yeah, because
I can point.
Especially here, this makes sense.
Right there.
Because out of our network, you and I are the ones who have the credential to cover the Steelers here. So yes, we can officially talk Steelers here. We were there in person throughout the past couple years. But Steelers OTA is going on right now. It's a new-look Steelers team in a way, despite Ben returning, despite some familiar faces still there, but a younger team. B.J. Finney in particular talking about just from where he was a couple years ago with the Steelers team, how incredibly different it looks, the hunger with those young players, and how maybe there's some positive there. Of course, Najee Harris and company adding on this team from the draft as it gets younger and did fill in some holes, despite that being a controversy on how they did in that draft. What are your takeaways right now from OTAs as we're still early in the offseason? We're not, of course, yet at training camp. It's going to be a long offseason with them playing in the Hall of Fame game, training camp a little bit earlier this year, but back in person, that seems to be a positive. We hear also from players the chemistry seems to be back conversation-wise and communication-wise from the pandemic rules mostly being lifted. But what are your current takeaways? And I do know that you actually touched on one of those over there at Steelers.com, SteelersNow.com, with some commentary on a new member of the Steelers, part of the quarterback depth.
Yeah, I just want to talk about the OTAs in general. You talked about how it's important that they're back. I talked to Cam Sutton the other day, and I do think it's important for the Steelers team because they have some spots on this team that they did not really address this offseason, right? Not in the way that they've brought in a player where it's reasonable to expect they're going to have NFL levels of production right away. I mean, like, okay, running back seems pretty well taken care of, right? You lose James Conner, you bring in Najee Harris. That's a first-round pick. That's a guy you expect to be a day-one starter. That's good and done. But I think if we look at positions like tackle, like cornerback, like outside linebacker, I think there's a lot more projection going on, right? There's guys that are being asked to do things that they've not done in the past. Chuks Okorafor has never been a left tackle. Alex Highsmith was not a day one starter last year, and none of those other outside linebackers have played hardly at all. And Cam Sutton's never been an outside corner. James Pierre's never been a nickel. None of these other guys have played. Trey Norwood's a 7th-round rookie looking like he's going to have a big role in that secondary. And so I think when you have guys without experience and without pedigree, this becomes a really crucial time for the Steelers. And so I really do think, for a team that's generally full of a lot of veterans, there are some position groups on this team, offensive line, the cornerback group. I think those two in particular, outside linebacker for sure, right, where these OTAs are critical. They need guys to step up with their knowledge because they have guys that are obviously not in a position where their athleticism alone has put them in a position to succeed. And so they've got to come through with knowledge. And, of course, the Steelers are also installing a new offense with Matt Canada, and Ben Roethlisberger joked about how new it is, was a bit sarcastic, saying, oh, yeah, we've thrown it all away. You're not going to see anything new, and we're going to use every play only once so as to not be predictable. Obviously a bit of sarcasm from Ben, but it is new. It's new terminology. And I'll tell you what, I covered this Matt Canada offense at Pitt in 2016. It is very, very crucially timed. I think that is the thing about this offense that I think is the most difficult to pick up is, those shifts and the jet motions and the pop, none of that works if everybody doesn't do exactly what they're supposed to do exactly when they're supposed to do it. That snap has to come out when the jet motion guy gets one step in front of the tackle, not at the tackle, not 2 steps in front of the tackle, 1 step in front of the tackle.
Doesn't that scream maybe that style of offense is better for a veteran team than now a younger team? Because these players are talented, but I could certainly see them being a second off in their cues, and that could screw the offense.
It could, but they also have the most experienced leader.
Quarterback-wise, sure.
Right. And so the one guy who has the most stress on him to kind of organize all of this is the most experienced guy you could possibly want. And it also seems like, and look, I mean, we're standing up on a balcony. It's hard to hear what people are saying. We have to take his word for it, that it seems like he's buying into this, that he is a willing participant in this project to install this different and new offense. And
I don't think he'd be there if not, because we talked about in the offseason that would be maybe a concern on whether or not he'd want to come back, because it is like going to a new team with a new offense, a new coach who has that leadership, even though he was there last year in Canada, but he chose to do it.
And if you have a Ben Roethlisberger running the ship, I think that's a pretty good place to start for a new offense. And they're also they're young in some places, especially on the line. Obviously, Najee Harris is young, but their wide receivers are very experienced. Eric Ebron's been around forever. And so it's not like they're totally devoid of experience either. Sure. And so I think they'll be fine. The offensive line is going to be very different. And they're going to be asked to do very different things, not only by a new offensive coordinator, but by a new offensive line coach as well, and Adrian Clem. And so, things are going to be different. And but I really do think this is a pretty critical period, these OTAs for these Steelers, maybe more so than you could say about this team over the years. I think most of the time at this point, you have a pretty good idea who the big players are going to be at every position for the Steelers. I'm not sure that's totally the case this year in the way it has been most of the time. There seem to be several jobs that are still up for grabs, and one of them is Ben Roethlisberger's backup, Mason Rudolph. had that job in 2019, had it last year, didn't do particularly well in 2019, did okay in his one game last year at Cleveland in week 17, but a pretty significant new challenger in Dwayne Haskins, who was a number 15 overall pick by Washington 2 years ago. And, we haven't talked to Dwayne since he's been in camp, but we've talked to a couple of other players about him. Ben Roethlisberger said he could throw a pass through a car wash and it wouldn't get wet, which made a lot of headlines. But right. I kind of wanted to push back. I wrote a column yesterday at Steelers Now that we've known Dwayne Haskins can throw the ball really well. That's why he was a first-round draft pick. That's why he was one of the most sought-after quarterbacks in the country coming out of Ohio State.
Right.
What didn't work for him in Washington.
There's a reason why he's a first-round pick, right?
Right. What didn't work for him in Washington, the reason he was a street free agent that the Steelers signed to a minimum contract with no guarantee this year, is that he bombed in Washington despite that arm, reportedly because he didn't take care of business. He didn't know the playbook. He didn't show up for meetings. He wasn't paying attention on the sideline. Yeah. And, very publicly got in trouble for blowing the COVID protocols last year. Just seemed like a guy that was not that into being a professional NFL player. This is it for him. I mean, this is his last chance. You come to this team, and if you can't make it for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't think too many other teams are going to give you a shot. And so I think it's really critical that we talk about the other stuff and not just his arm. We've known he has a good arm. We're sure he can throw the football.
That's not breaking news.
Knowing where to throw the football and when, and we just talked about how complicated this offense can be for the quarterback. And I'm a little bit less sure of what kind of performance we're going to get out of Dwayne Haskins when he gets some preseason games, because I think that's really the key here. He has the talent to be as good or better than Mason Rudolph, to take a spot away from the two veteran guys, Rudolph and Josh Dobbs, who are seemingly entrenched behind Ben Roethlisberger. He also clearly has the ability to flame out and not be an option at all, as we saw last year when Washington decided that they'd rather play, what's his name, Trevor Heineke. He's so meaningless, I haven't even committed his first name to memory, but he got the start over Haskins in a must-win game at the end of last season. So
I remember the jokes at that time where Hennessy beat out Haskins after he kind of maybe had an off-the-field issue, and that,
it was Heineken, not Hennessy. Heineken.
Right. Heineken, correct, yes.
But so I think that'll be the real telling thing about whether or not. And look, this is a good bet for the Steelers either way. If Dwayne Haskins doesn't put in the work and he doesn't turn out to be a player, they've committed nothing. And if he does, they may have a first-round quarterback for pennies on the dollar. So it's a great win-win move for the Steelers. But let's talk about the stuff that's important and not how strong his arm is. We've known that.
Well, and of course they're going to try to, and this could be part of this too. It's low risk, high reward with Haskins for sure. I'm sure that was what the Steelers were thinking. This is a first-round guy. He's out there. The talent's there. We can somehow, with a veteran coach and a veteran quarterback who's going to mentor him, we can do this if we can get him out of the bar, which I think also what you hit on that maybe is underrated even from tabs I have into over there in DC media is the fact that people talked about, like Johnny Manziel, the off the field kind of ruined things for him when he has the strong arm. It wasn't just that. He was falling asleep in meetings. He wasn't learning the playbook. If he would have just been going to bars, no matter what bars they were, and he was seemingly smart and was learning the playbook and was there in practice, they would have tried. They're not going to give up on a first-round pick in 2 years if it's just going to bars.
There's been lots of real good football players who have spent every off night in a bar in their entire career.
Right, and he's still young.
That's far from an exclusionary vice.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, if he showed up drunk and it looked like he learned the playbook and was great in practice, not to say that they would have liked it or they wouldn't have tried to make him be sober, but they wouldn't have got rid of him that quick.
It's a results-based business.
Right. And he didn't provide the results even in practice, even not in games, of course, even in training camp. There are even reports that he wasn't even personally nice to the coaches, that it was contentious to even try to coach this man. So it clearly seemed to be too much trouble. His production did not outweigh the problem that he was. He's low risk, high reward for the Steelers, so I like them bringing him in. But if it's just his arm that's wowing you, and I get Ben and everyone saying how impressed they are, because when you bring a new guy in that maybe has some issues, but you know there's talent there, you're not going to just criticize the man every single day for the first few weeks. You're going to try to wrap your arms around him and say, hey, look, man, past is the past. Let's try to move on. You're talented. Look at that arm strength. If you can show up here and learn this playbook, maybe you can beat out Mason because of that arm strength. Whatever you got to do. So I get they're trying to help him. I get him being there. I get it. I am surprised, though, that he would even have a chance to beat out Mason at this point. Maybe I shouldn't be with his talent, but the Steelers also love Mason. We heard glowing things about Mason, and he did play well in that game against Cleveland last year, and it seemed to be his progress was there. But we will see when Ben is officially gone, if Haskins stays all year and is able to play well enough to be the backup, or if Ben would miss time, which is very possible. Who would be the guy they go to? Mason has the experience now. Maybe Haskins has more talent. And then the conversation in next offseason, even with Mason's new contract, figuring that locked Mason up to get it if they don't draft somebody else. But maybe Haskins can be maybe the Steelers can say, hey, we have a first-round pick to replace Ben, even if we didn't make the pick because it was a couple years ago and we lucked out because we're now going to fix things. Who knows? That'll be a conversation I'm sure that'll continue on this offseason, be a continuation of whenever Ben does flirt with not playing well or have to miss a game for whatever reason on who should come in there, especially if Haskins impresses. When we can all get down there to Latrobe and St. Vincent this year training camp, we'll be able to see it in person. And if he's zipping balls and he's learning the playbook and they're glowing about him, then we might have a backup quarterback controversy that we certainly can touch on here throughout the Steelers offseason. This, of course, is Mic'd Up, of course, presented by Martin Lawn Services. He is Alan Michael Saunders. I am Mike Asti. Now, to close up the show, it is also a topic that we haven't touched on the last couple weeks, except for a few post-game shows. But the Pirates also weren't giving us as much to talk about, but now do with KeBryan Hayes' return. He's finally back, played very well upon his return. They won some games. They're going into a much tougher situation, though, with the Dodgers, et cetera, coming up here. But it's all about the individual play mostly. Thoughts on KeBryan Hayes' return? He was certainly out for a while, re-aggravated things. There maybe is concern about his health and him being so young. But thoughts on his return, now seeing pitches again? Is he still giving you that wow factor that you felt before? And is there any signs of life with some of these young players, some of these Pirate players, that maybe they have a little bit more building blocks than some would have thought? There was a national conversation that went on Sunday Night Baseball recently. Mike and I did actually discuss it on the last show about possibly is Adam Frazier more part of the future than some would have thought.
Well, I think KeBryan Hayes is a good young player. I'm not sure he's some kind of guaranteed future star at this point. That'll be determined by the way he progresses from here, but he's certainly got the talent and the ability to turn out that way. I don't really think that his absence this year hurt him very much. Obviously, hurt the team's record. Not that I think that matters because I'm not even sure they were trying to win. But there's not anything to me that we should feel bad about KeBryan Hayes for him. But I think his absence really sapped a lot of the enthusiasm out of this season for the Pirates fans as sort of the COVID pandemic's restrictions started to lift and you could finally go back to the ballpark. And you look at a team without KeBryan Hayes, no Stephen Brault, no Chad Kuhl until very recently, no Colin Moran until just Sunday. And it was who are these guys? And not in a good way as they went through that stretch where they lost, was it 6 or 7 in a row in Atlanta and against the Cubs. And that was a pretty bad place. And so I think KeBryan has the possibility to inject some life into this season from an entertainment standpoint. If nothing else, I'm not sure they're going to win, but at least gives fans someone to go see because I've said it all season. This is not like, those – if we think back to those early Sidney Crosby Penguin teams when, okay, maybe they weren't very good, but, you could go watch a young Sidney Crosby, a young Marc-Andre Fleury, a young Chris Letang, and a young Jordan Stahl and Evgeny Malkin, and you could wish on those guys. None of those guys are playing for the Pirates right now. You asked me if Adam Frazier is a part of the future. No, he's not. Adam Frazier won't be a Pirate in 2 months' time. Guarantee it. Nor should he be. That's the right move. But, no, there's nobody else on this team
Well, maybe there's some pitchers that have emerged. What about JT Brubaker or Tyler Anderson?
Mitch Keller is the other guy who maybe you thought could be that guy and hasn't pitched very well, ends up on the COVID list after his last start. And so, yeah, JT Brubaker's he's an interesting prospect. I'm not sure he's a guy that I'm hanging my hat on. There's really very little else about this team to get excited about the future except for talking about who they're going to draft, with the first pick. I mean, win or lose, there are not a lot of guys on this team that are going to be a part of the next good Pirates team. There just aren't. And maybe Brian Reynolds is a guy, he's playing pretty well right now. Adam Frazier is simply just not going to be part of their future. He's just not. He's, already, I think, 28 and not, they're still 2 or 3 years away from being in contention. He's a free agent. And so that's not going to happen. But Colin Moran might be in that boat too.
Has KeBryan Hayes done enough? Because every time you look at the numbers, 28 games, I believe he's reached base safely 23 out of the 28, something like that. I saw. So that's incredible. Obviously, we're looking at a short sample size, a small sample size from the end of last season in September, and now the first weekend of the season, and here these past few games. But does KeBryan Hayes' return in the fact that he is hitting and he is giving you a wow factor and he is playing well and he is playing well offensively and defensively, even if nobody else is, while in there, does him being in there, win or lose or draw or no matter what goes on, give Pirate fans more of a reason to get down to the ballpark? Do you expect maybe the attendance percentage to increase at all the rest of the season if Hayes can continue to play well, even if they don't win? Can he save attendance-wise this year?
Man, I don't know, because there's so many factors in that, but I really thought that you'd have seen with him coming back, Colin Moran coming back, Chad Kuhl coming back, a beautiful weekend in the city with a bunch of other stuff going on, a lot of other reasons to go downtown. The arts festival's happening. It was Pride, the first weekend of the Pride Festival, like all kinds of reasons to go downtown. They had 5,400 people at the ballpark on Sunday. I mean,
Yeah, now, and I'll tell you, my wife and I, we stayed in a hotel in downtown Pittsburgh after getting married, and I stayed there with our reservation the night before and then was getting picked up there to go down to the venue. And I saw everything was going on. I even included the Pirate game. I was lock jammed in there with all the people down there. I texted my best man, hey, I don't know if you can even turn to my street to pick me up. And when you think about Pride, you think about Arts Fest, you look at all those people down there from the North Shore, North Side, all the way to downtown. I guess it had to be from Pride and Arts Fest. I would assume the Pirates would have included some of that crowd, but then you look at the attendance number, based on what I saw in my eyes, it didn't look like the Pirates were part of hardly any of those people. So, there was a lot going on downtown. Downtown Pittsburgh, it was more popping than it's been in a year and a half this past weekend, but I guess none thanks to the Pirates.
Yeah, and we'll see listen, the Marlins aren't a draw in Miami.
Well, Marte returning, though.
Yeah, I love Starlin Marte. He's a great guy.
Yeah, awesome.
But the Dodgers coming in this week, tonight, tomorrow, Thursday. Maybe that'll bring some people out. I don't know. I think I'd be worried about the Pirates' attendance the rest of the way. And like I said, this is complicated because I do think there are still a lot of people in the area that are hesitant to want to go back into crowds.
Okay,
and
sure.
I do think that's a complicated discussion. It's not just about the ball club being bad. I think that you're seeing that. There are some events that have been very well attended, but there have been plenty that have not been well attended despite loosening restrictions, because I think you're just seeing people still be cautious, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but I think it's up to the Pirates to put a product on the field that people really, really want to see, and I just don't think they have that right now, even with KeBryan Hayes. And I don't have any hope. I mean, they're 23-35 right now. I don't have any hope that they're going to go on some run and contend in the division or something like that. That's not happening.
Of course
not going to. If there's excitement coming to this team, it's not going to be because their record gets better. It's going to have to be because some young players, Hayes primarily being one of them. Maybe you could include Reynolds. Maybe you could include a Mitch Keller, a Brubaker. Maybe they bring up a guy, although he's injured now. Travis Saggerty would have been the guy, but maybe they do bring up another player from AAA or something like that to get some enthusiasm going. But that's the only way it's coming, as if people get excited about some of these young players, because the team isn't turned itself around.
That is the only way. And I guess I was asking you, and I guess I kind of got the answer. Can KeBryan Hayes move the needle in terms of attendance by himself, as well as he's been playing when out there? It probably is an answer of no. Maybe that's not fair to him to say he's not a draw by himself, because we are dealing with a pandemic. We are dealing with a lot of other circumstances, but it probably looks like at the end of the season, numbers-wise, we won't be able to say factually that KeBryan Hayes can bring people and put butts in the seats. And we'll maybe have to wait till next year when they're once again going to be bad. They're still going to be part of the rebuild. If he can be healthy all year, can at least start the first few months of the season. I think missing time also hurts, because Pirate fans left the Pirates even figuring, well, now it's over. Key isn't there, so we're looking at Steelers season. If you can get the first few months with him next year, everything opened up. Hopefully we're continuing to be better off with the pandemic, vaccines, etc. Then maybe we'll be able to have a better barometer. But right now, it doesn't appear he'll be able to save things attendance-wise. He at least makes it a better watch on TV, though, and we will try to give our takes after games and offer some post-game shows here coming up with KeBryan Hayes, giving us some more to talk about possibly, but it will not be easy with the Dodgers, as you mentioned, coming to town. That's going to do it for this edition of the show. Stick with us here, of course, the rest of the week, and also hit up the Now family of networks. This is another edition of Mic'd Up here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. He's Alan Michael Saunders, Mike Vukovcan out this week, and I'm Mike Asti. So, again, keep it here, and thanks again, of course, to Martin Lawn Services there at 412-849-5894.